Good morning, good afternoon and good evening. Welcome back to some Club 100 sprint racing for round number 10, penultimate round of the year at Ella Park, where the weather was finally quite changeable. The lightweights in the morning had an absolutely torrid time of it, pouring down with rain in the morning, eventually stopped, but it was a very, very wet circuit. As you can see, the circuit is still wet, it's cold, it's slidey as we go for heat number 1, where we're starting at row 4. And we've got the current champion, Mr. Joe Holmes. So if we can keep up with him, we'll be quite happy with that. But going through the first couple of corners, he actually ended up getting a bit of a short straw there, and we managed to sneak up the inside. He was nerfed onto the outside, and we've made a couple of places straight off the start. Very slidey to went through that double right-hander. Got the knack of it later on in the day, but quite a tricky corner as car in front of us dips a tyre onto the apron of the circuit. Doesn't get the best run through the tight left-hander, but in the fact that we got a bit of a compromise line onto the slidiest bit of the circuit, the bit that hasn't been run over throughout the course of the morning, we couldn't quite get the drive to get off that corner and make the place. But as we can see, we get nice and close to the apex going through the right-hander, but not quite able to keep that momentum up as we come off the exit. But we are able to try having a look down the inside as we get towards the tail end of the lap, able to keep the momentum on the inside, but so does the car on the outside of us. One car loses traction on the road, ends up spinning, and we were able to make one place there. Nearly ended up taking out the car in front of us. They weren't able to get much drive off that long sweeping right-hander, whereas we were able to get to the inside of turn number 1 as we start lap number 2, and we've made our way up into second place. Phil Ingram, who's currently in first place, has disappeared off into the distance. He said, "See you later, I'm off," and we make ourselves our P2 now as we secure the move, going through the double right-hander. Now, we can see on the board in front of us that there's a cone penalty for kart number 1. That's Joe Holmes, who we know is coming through the field at the moment behind us. And as we come to the last sector of the lap, about halfway through, we see it behind us, and we've tried to let him through. Don't do a particularly good job of it as we drift wide and actually tap the tyre barrier, so not particularly good for us. But Joe comes through, and that's of no real consequence to us because he's going to get a one-place demotion. So unless he absolutely smashes it, shock, he didn't, because I don't think anyone could have broken down that gap to Phil. We end up inheriting P number 2 as we go to heat number 2, or at least our heat number 2. We're on the inside this time, and we just couldn't get it turned. There was absolutely no grip on the inside, so that was a case of turning the wheel and nothing was happening. But what is happening now is we were able to probably get the best drive of all the karts around us coming off that corner somehow, and we've snuck ourselves up into P1. So as we come into the left-hand hairpin, we try the outside line where there might be a bit more grip for us. As the day went on, actually the inside line started being pretty good, but try the outside line there, and we're starting to drive away at this point. Getting this double right-hander right, but we get it a bit too right that time as we clip those tyres on the inside, and that was being counted as a cone penalty. As you can see there was a penalty on the board. That was for us, unfortunately. So even though throughout the course of this race we'd end up pulling away and we would come across the line 9, nearly 10 seconds I think it was to the good over P2, we were only ever going to finish P2 in this race, having lost our chance to win with that cone penalty. So frustrating, but the pace felt good in that race. As we move on to our heat number 3, you can start to see it's getting a bit darker now, getting a bit grainier, so sorry about that. I forgot to change the settings on the camera, but starting to get a bit darker. It's definitely getting colder, and from this point onwards it's not really going to dry up. There's not really enough temperature to help get rid of the water that's currently on the circuit. There's a bit of a collision in front of us. We nearly get collected, but we're able to stay onto the inside as Dickie Allen comes past us after our momentum gets hurt, and he's been absolutely rapid all weekend, so it would be nice if we could stayed on his bumper, but he's already disappeared and he's throwing up the inside of the car in front of him, and he's about to make a pretty sweet little move, so he keeps it nice and tight through that fast right-hander up the inside. We tried to follow him through, we get a good line, but the kart was still on our outside. We couldn't really keep the momentum as we came through the right-hander, and we had to relinquish that place and try to look for somewhere else to make this move up into P3. But on that first lap, I think Anwar must have clipped a cone, or possibly been deemed to have made an overtaking manoeuvre with contact, because he ended up with a couple of penalties in this race, which means if we can get past this kart in front, which we're looking to do as we start this lap, we've lost some time going through the first corner. If we can get ourselves up into P3, that would become P2, and we'd be the king of second place in the heats. As we come to the double right-hander, we get a really good launch coming off the second of those two. Kart in front can't quite slow it down. We're able to get to the apex and we get a better line. We're able to seal that position off, and we're in P3, effective P2. And it's going to be a very lonely race from this point because we'd lost a bit of time behind the driver that we've just overtaken. Anwar and Richard have just absolutely cleared off. But as we come across the line to start the last lap, we knew that as long as we didn't do anything stupid on this, we would end up in P2. So that's 3 heats, 3 second places, and that would be good enough for P4 on the A final grid. So here we are for the A final of round number 10 at Ella Park, where we're under the Sunday night lights around a really good fun circuit, especially in these tricky changing conditions, as we get a very fast run up to the line. We're right on Phil's bumper, who didn't get a particularly good start, and we make a mistake. Not sure if I was helped. I'm probably going to say it's purely my mistake, but we've been pretty good at giving ourselves room in the driver in front room, but I feel like there I probably just ran Phil off the road. So really sorry, Phil. I didn't really feel like I did it on the day, but watching this footage back, I don't think I was probably loaded as much as maybe I thought I was. So that's completely my bad. Really sorry. As we can see, a little bit of argy-bargy happening up in front of us. We're trying to make the best of what has so far been a pretty awful start. Having started P4, we are dropping backwards and absolutely chucking places in the bin, as Anwar and Kurt Holmes have a little bit of a coming together. Still looking for that move up the inside. It's Anwar keeping it really tight. That might be the line that we want to be taking later, and it definitely seemed to work for him, and he's made that move. We've lost a couple of places going through that corner, but we try the outside as we come through the final tight corner of the lap and go through this long sweeper, having been rather forcefully, forcefully is the wrong word, assertively shown the door on the exit of that tight left-hander. Able to get a good line through turn number 1, even though it is getting pretty slidey out there. Not that it's rained any more than it had previously, it's just getting colder, and the dampness in the circuit is just refusing to leave. One thing we were able to do, though, is get it up the inside as we go through the hairpin. That inside line, as we said earlier, was definitely coming back, and we were moving away from that outside line through there, taking a much more normal racing line. These slick Bridgestone tyres do a really good job in the damp conditions like this. Moving on to doublers. Dunlops is the correct word for the tyres we're using next year, so we'll find out what those will be like, but from the testing that's been done, apparently they're pretty good, and I'd imagine Club 100 wouldn't put us on boots that were shoddy, so full confidence in them. We can see there's a bit of a gap to Kurt and Anwar in front of us as we continue through this race, but we've managed to break it down a little bit, still right behind Kurt now, and we're going to see what we can do, see if we can make a move on our C2 competitor. So in the sprints we've got C1, C2 and C3. We're in C2, as is Kurt, as we make a move on him. We've got Tim Williams, I think that is in front of us now, who is also a C2 driver. Anwar in front of him is a C1 driver. So we're going to see what we can do. We've secured that move on Kurt. I think he's on our outside as we go into that last corner, but we were able to keep the line going through there. Tim looking a little bit shaky going through the second of those two right-handers. Tricky corner, but good fun. You had to almost get the back end out and sort of almost power slide it through that corner to get that rotation of the kart, so you could really get the drive off. If you didn't get the kart rotated, you weren't going to get a good launch of that second right-hander. But as we look in front, Anwar getting a little bit too greedy maybe in their braking zone. He ends up running wide, and that was absolute swimming pool on the outside of that corner. Very treacherous, and you can see him there just trying to make sure he got back on circuit safely, which is fantastic. We almost do the same as him as we go into the last corner, or third from last corner, I think we're going to call that one. But we managed to keep it off the red stuff, but we're kind of all over the place in this last section. Anwar's had a much better line than us, and we're going to let him take this place as we go into the first corner. Again, he's a C1 driver. We know he's pretty damn quick, and we're going to see if we can follow him to try and catch this group in front. Now, Anwar was taking a bit of a different line through this corner than me, and mine had been working absolutely fine, and I don't know what went through my head, but I started trying to copy Anwar's line, even though pace-wise we were pretty similar, and then this happened.
I am stupid. I am stupid.
Yeah, I was mighty pissed off. So Anwar was taking it slightly wider than I was on the first part of the entry. I was going in slightly narrower, and rather than doing the smart thing, which would be to keep my line in tricky conditions like this, I decided to try and see if I could emulate, because he was admittedly getting a better run through there than I was, but I was able to get it back in a few other places, so I should have just stayed. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we ended up putting it in the barrier and threw away what was going to be a P3 in Class 2. So now we had maybe 2-3 laps to try and break down this gap of the karts in front of us that were fighting with each other quite a bit. So it was definitely slowing them down, giving us a chance to catch up with them and make maybe 1 or 2 positions on the last lap of the race. But you can see here we've got still a reasonable gap to them in front, but as we come into this last corner, the fact that they're tripping over each other a little bit, we absolutely demolished that gap, and we're right on the bumper now of Mikey Nichols. We have a little look on the inside of him, try and get Tim Williams as well in the process, but we can't quite get the drive off. Mikey absolutely shoots at our inside. He got a great drive off that right-hander. But this is the last lap. We wouldn't be able to make either of those moves stick, unfortunately, and I don't think I've left a Club 100 event as quick as I left this one, not just because it's a long drive back to Cheltenham from Beccles, but I wasn't best pleased. Looking back at it though, looking back at it though, it was like the heats were really good fun. Good weekend, if not for that little spin, which I don't do often, which is good. But I enjoyed it in hindsight. I hope you did too. And until next time, have a good one.